Star Wars returns, and it's certified fresh.
Are you ready?
I sense this is only a small part of a larger plan.
Star Wars: The Acolyte. New episodes Tuesdays, only on Disney+.
Hello there.
This is where the fun begins.
I absolutely love Star Wars, and I have really been loving The Acolyte. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna hop right on into it. What's up, guys? Unofficial Star Wars here. Hope you're all doing well, and well, better late than never. Welcome to my Star Wars The Acolyte, Episode 3, The Acolyte, kind of just overall initial thoughts and reaction video. Just finished watching the third and latest episode of The Acolyte at the time of recording and publishing this video here, and this entire episode was a bit of a flashback sequence. Yes, of course, there are spoilers in this video. I think that goes as a bit of a given, but my non-spoiler kind of just reaction and initial thoughts is this one actually, this gets you. Like, I'm not even gonna lie to you guys, I kind of teared up on this one, and I can't tell if this is because it really had phenomenal like actors in it. The child actors for young Osha and young May are spot on. They look just like them, and they're phenomenal actors. They really get you in the gut there, and I was tearing up. I'm not even gonna lie to you guys, because this was such an emotional episode too as well, based off of everything that we've seen and have heard and kind of just have learned from those first two episodes. You really get to see this flashback sequence now, and it's not like they kind of just like hold on to it and aren't ever going to give it to us. They finally give it to us rather fairly, early on. It feels like this is something that you would maybe finally get after so many episodes, like episode 5 or 6 even, out of an 8-episode series. But the Acolyte gives us this flashback sequences, fills in all those gaps here now. So as I kind of already touched on there into that some of that spoiler kind of territory here, moving more so into that spoiler territory here, of course, is that this is exactly what this entire episode is. It's entirely flashbacks and filling in those gaps of everything that we've known and everything that we've been learning and seeing unfold in those first 2 episodes, the motives and the reasonings behind all of our characters here. It feels like usually we would finally get some of this, not behind the scenes, but like some of this backstory more so explained a little bit later down the road. When you have 8 total episodes to work with here, this feels like something that you wouldn't see until the 6th, 7th, or even 8th final episode of any given series. Not just that, but the Acolyte has done something that we've never seen before in Star Wars television, and that is having an entire episode dedicated to just flashbacks. You could argue maybe that Obi-Wan Kenobi, I believe it was episode 5 or episode 6, kind of does that, but even then, they flash back and forth between the present time of when Obi-Wan Kenobi takes place on the canon timeline, and then back to the Clone Wars, or the prequel kind of era there, where they're training Anakin versus Obi-Wan. But even then, we don't have something like with what the Acolyte Episode 3 just gave us. It's entirely just a flashback, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, of course, we have never seen or had anything like this before. And that's just that exactly with the Acolyte, as well as bringing me to my next point here. I'll continue to praise this in and out of our Acolyte videos here on the channel. Of course, is that that's a big point with the Acolyte, is that the stakes are there. We know that as fans, we know that as an audience, but the other flip side of that is that the writers know that. They see that. Leslye Headland sees that and knows that there as well, is that the stakes are there, and they play around with that heavily. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know who's going to kick the bucket. So also really having that at the same time really keeps you at the edge of your seats and really just engage with anything and everything that the Acolyte is kind of throwing at us. Of course, as well as I had to mention with those first 2 episodes of the Acolyte, kind of, having a bit of those points and teases with what happened 16 years ago, with having May starting a fire that kills pretty much everybody there in their little, behind the walls or behind the borders there as well. I love the world building that the show offers as well. We'll get into that in just a moment as well. They really go on and explain that pretty much and really show us the entire story of how all of that goes down. This episode feels a lot like, almost like a Clone Wars episode, or maybe a Star Wars Rebels episode, more familiar to Star Wars, the Clone Wars though, with the Night Witches, the Night Sisters, and the magic, and explaining more about the Force and Force sensitivity, and more of that lore building, that world building though, there at the same time, of a galaxy far, far away during this point in time. The Night Sisters have their own ideas of the Force. They even have their own names for it there as well, as we learn in this episode. I think this is something that we've also have been knowing, a part of just the Star Wars canon lore through the Clone Wars animated show, but even then, I think that this episode really more so kind of really just solidifies that in itself. And it plays more so into the idea of how the Sith technically have their own ideas of the Force. The Jedi have their own ideas of the Force. Even Grey Jedi and other Force users have their ideas of the Force. And I think this is a prime example of that slot to fill other Force users. Technically, the witches would technically be Force users, how they have their different ideas and versions of the Force, how they use it, how they interpret it, how they use it a part of their lifestyle as well. Everything that goes on with the witches, or these Force witches, we're just going to call them witches because that is what they are, having their own ideas of being like almost like this minority. They're forced into the hiding away from the Jedi. They have their interpretation of the Jedi. The Jedi are after their kids, their children, their younger witches to kind of convert them into being Jedi is kind of what we see here as well. Of course, Osha wants to go more willingly, May doesn't, and the Jedi respect that at the same time. They show both sides of the stories kind of in a way of the Jedi taking young, Force users and kind of converting them to be Jedi essentially. I also want to mention, before I get too ahead of myself here and kind of forget, as per usual, we will have a full in-depth review video about the Acolyte episode 3/breakdown. I'll go over different things that you guys might have missed throughout this episode here as well. For those of you that also know or don't know, I am a film major at Motion Picture Institute, a big film buff, and this show thus far, especially with episode 3, does everything correctly, it feels like as well. Just as somebody that's very much so into film, studying that and working within the film industry, working on different commercials around my area here in Detroit, it's very cool to see how all that comes out as well. Like, I'm also kind of interpreting and breaking stuff down on that side of things as well. Besides all that, the highest praise to the Acolyte thus far has been nothing but short of amazing. I'm just at the edge of my seat taking it all in. I love everything about this show. It really has you wondering what's going to happen next because you just don't know. There's no plot armor for any of these characters necessarily. At least with this episode, we know just about all the Jedi are of course going to make it out, but was not expecting and anticipating that with the Mama character, and also for May there as well. All the kind of coven of these witches, you just don't anticipate that exactly. I'll have a whole nother argument video discussing and talking about this, but I have seen a couple of other people since then discussing and kind of like saying that, oh, they're copying with what they did with the Chosen One prophecy, with Anakin just kind of coming out of thin air, out of the Force, like all of a sudden this lady is pregnant and it's the Chosen One, Shmi Skywalker, and the Phantom Menace. That isn't, I think people are interpreting it wrongly. It's just kind of what they're saying is that the twins, Osha and May, just don't have a father figure around. There is a father, but he just isn't around, is kind of how Mama explains it, and that's kind of how it feels, but some people are interpreting it wrong and making it sound like maybe that there just wasn't ever a father. Anyway, I'll have a whole nother video discussing that, as well as our review video here on the channel as well. Guys, stay on the lookout for all of that by grabbing that subscribe button if you haven't already. Of course, I would love to hear all of your thoughts and opinions in the comment section down below. Thanks so much for watching today's video. Of course, this has been Unofficial Star Wars. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Have a great one. May the Force be with you as always. Peace out.